Diamonds are known as the world's most beautiful gem, at the same time a symbol for love and status, as well as one of the rarest gems out there. Except they're not. Diamonds are beautiful, for sure, but they're just carbon, and the associations we have with them are all down to one of the best marketing campaigns the world has ever seen, designed to boost the sales of a monopoly that has left plenty of death and destruction wherever it went. In a market that looks like it's got plenty of competitors today, with disruptive technologies looking like they're about to shake things up, it's crazy to think about how one company was able to grab hold of the whole industry and transform the way that most of the world thought about diamonds. The South African company of De Beers is the one at the heart of this story, known for luxury, elegance, and its iconic pieces, much more than it's recognized for its marketing, mining, and manipulation over decades. The story of how diamonds got the role that they have in society today is a weird one, which makes you think about some of the norms we take as a given and the dark history behind how a lot of modern society came to be. This is the story of how one company used diamonds to create one of history's most profitable cartels in one of the best marketing plays the world has ever seen. When the first humans started to find diamonds, they were actually very rare gems. In 800 BC, people in India started finding rough diamonds in riverbeds, and they would use them in trade for things like silk and spices. They remained rare, and they were seen as a status symbol in India and the countries that it would trade with. Diamonds were also found in places like Brazil in the 1700s, but even if the gems were seen as luxurious and beautiful, they were never particularly popular. Once the British took over the Indian subcontinent in the 1800s, they liked the diamonds, but there weren't many of them to go around. It was only when another of the British colonies, South Africa, started reporting their findings that people really started to take interest. In 1886, a South African farmer found a 22-carat diamond in a local riverbed, and quickly after that, the South African diamond rush began. There's a saying that goes, during a gold rush, sell shovels, and one man named Cecil Rhodes did the equivalent of just that, selling water pipes and installing facilities for all these mines that were popping up. He used his profits from that to set up his own mine, and he quickly started expanding. He partnered with the De Beers brothers, who owned land, and set the foundations for what would become De Beers Consolidated Mines Limited. With a plan to expand and take over the market as countless diamond mines were popping up all over South Africa, they received funding from the Rothschild family and proceeded to buy the vast majority of these mines all over the country. With that, they consolidated the South African diamond mining operation, by far the biggest in the world at the time, under their company, and took control of the market. The price of any good is determined by supply and demand. The curves that make up this mechanism are the basis of economics, and where they cross dictates the price. In a state of perfect competition, with multiple similarly sized competitors, the lines would meet at a midpoint that makes sense for everyone involved. When one company controls 90% of the supply of the good from the world's largest producer, as was the case with De Beers in South Africa in the early 1900s though, you can have control of how much supply is on the market, and they did just that. Because there were multiple different mines popping up all over the country before they started buying them up, prices began to fall as supply increased. Markets, especially before the age of easily accessible information though, are all based on perception. So in order to keep the allure of diamonds being a rare gemstone, and so that they could set the high prices they liked, De Beers dramatically limited the supply. The business model shifted from trying to dig as many diamonds out of the ground as possible to trying to control how many diamonds were actually on the market. They created a strategic partnership with the London Diamond Syndicate and set up a series of satellite companies around the world under pseudonyms to hide the fact that they were a monopoly. These satellite companies operated like a cartel. Usually cartels are associated with drugs and gangs, but all a cartel really is a group of companies or actors coming together to fix prices so that all of them get a share of the larger profits. Over the years, they monopolized not just South African diamond mining, but diamond mining in pretty much all of Central and Southern Africa. That involved kidnappings, murders, interrogations, beatings, labeling people as criminals, and anything else it took to have control over them. They then created a network of merchants who were the only people that they would sell to directly. There were about 200 of these merchants where they would buy from De Beers, and they would be the only ones selling to the rest of the world. Through this, De Beers was able to control exactly how much supply of which type of diamonds were out there so they could keep prices high. This worked wonders, and they were able to make hundreds of millions off the back of that. But it still wasn't enough to break into the biggest market of them all in the US. So they went all out to completely transform the public's demand for diamonds. The 20th century saw its fair share of iconic marketing campaigns. But what De Beers did with the diamond industry might just be the best of the lot. In the early 1930s, America was in the Great Depression, and diamond sales had plummeted since people couldn't justify spending large sums of money, and where jewelry was commonly seen as a luxury that was reserved only for the richer people in society. De Beers started off by opening an office near Hollywood, where they started gifting multiple diamonds to well-known and influential people, movie stars, and film producers, who would wear their diamonds and be seen with them all around. They started the process of making diamonds become the quintessential symbol of love and status, and people couldn't get enough of them. Other precious stones had been popular in the West for centuries, particularly with the richer classes. So as well as promoting diamonds, they would do bits and pieces to tarnish the reputation of other stones and amplify that of diamonds. As people started buying more diamonds, they were scared that previous buyers would look to sell off their diamonds and flood the market with them, harming their price. So that's where the real genius came in. 3 words would go on to shape the industry for more than half a century. Diamonds are forever. They continued to tie them as a symbol for love with the diamond engagement ring, and another of their major slogans, how else could 2 months' salary last forever? They made it a thing to get your wife a new diamond on every romantic milestone, and they made it so that women would want to buy their own diamonds as a status symbol for the new independent woman of the 20th century. The slogan of "Diamonds are forever" became an inspiration for songs, books, and movie adaptations, with even a James Bond film having that title. The notion of having to propose to a girl with a diamond ring, and that diamonds are a girl's best friend, became so ingrained in our culture that people just assume that's how it's always been, without being aware that their gravitation towards it is just a result of history's greatest marketing campaign. The best part about this whole thing is that even after it was common knowledge that diamonds aren't in fact that rare, and the damage they cause to people, environment, and countries, people still saw it as their preferred gem. Diamonds aren't really rare because they're just carbon. The difference between a diamond and the lead in the pencils you use, which are just made of graphite, which are also just carbon, is just a slightly different structure of the atoms. The carbon atoms in diamonds are bonded together asymmetrically, which just means they're the same in all directions from the midpoint. What does make diamonds harder to come by is that they only form deep in the Earth's crust under immense pressure and super high temperatures. They then have to make their way up to the Earth's surface through magma and cool very slowly over years to grow into big crystals. Over the decades, different countries started to find that they had huge deposits of diamonds in their territory. This was a threat to De Beers' monopoly, but they initially played their cards very well. Huge mines were found in Siberia in the 1950s and Australia in the 1970s, but with a bit of lobbying, under-the-table money, bribing, and favors granted here and there, the supplies were majoritarily under the control and flowing through the base in London. For the most part, until the end of the century, De Beers maintained their firm grip on the industry, but some of their own actions ended up leading to their downfall. Different states in southern and central Africa also started finding more deposits. Sometimes De Beers were able to take over these mines successfully themselves, like they had done previously in South Africa. Other times, these mines were run by rebel groups and anti-government factions, who were more than happy to sell the diamonds to them to fund their war efforts. That's ultimately where the name for blood diamonds comes from. These diamonds were not only sourced from people with terrible working and hygiene conditions, often akin to slavery, and caused widespread environmental damage, but they also funded civil wars and military coups. Even if they did have one of the most successful and profitable monopolies in history, operating under disguise and not really recognized as such, De Beers' control over the market didn't last forever. De Beers as a company is easily not only one of the most successful monopolies in history, but also they're a company that shaped the public perception of a resource in a way that few others can rival. As tends to be the case with monopolies regardless of their size, seemingly unless they're American tech giants in the 21st century, their time came to an end, albeit in a weird way. The 2006 movie Blood Diamond, set in the Sierra Leone Civil War, which ran from 1991 to 2002, did a lot to bring awareness to the public of what the diamond supply chain was actually like. By 2011, De Beers had not only pled guilty to price fixing, but they also had to pay almost $300 million in an antitrust settlement that accused it of overcharging for their diamonds. In 2014, Russian company Alrosa became the biggest diamond supplier in the world, and although De Beers remains as one of the most sought-after diamond brands out there, their revenue has declined by more than half since the settlement. The loss of their monopoly wasn't all down to competitors and lawsuits though. In the last few years, there's been a new competitor in the diamond market which could fundamentally shift the trajectory that the whole industry goes in. As we mentioned earlier, diamonds are just carbon atoms organized in a particular way. They're not particularly rare, but their properties are. Because of their atomic structure, they have great properties in that they're one of the hardest and most highly conductive materials on Earth. The man-made production of diamonds has been possible at least since the 1960s, but for the longest time, people were only able to make very small amounts of it, and it tended to be used for industrial applications. The synthetic diamonds and the diamonds dug up from the ground are chemically, physically, and optically identical to each other, and synthetic diamonds cost much less than a mining operation. Around 10 or so years ago though, we started to see real improvements in the technology, making the product of such a quality that it could actually be used in jewelry. Over the coming decades, we'll also probably start seeing them in appliances, in things like screens, solar panels, cameras, electronic devices, and semiconductors, but they're not quite there yet. They're still far from being mass-produced to the point of seeing them more present in high-tech applications, but the potential is there for their use case. More importantly for what we've been looking at though, is that they've started to be used more and more in jewelry, which is going to cause a fundamental shift in the entire market. Not only are synthetic diamonds going to be a viable option as products that compete for sales with diamonds from the ground, but they're also going to impact the price of ground diamonds directly. Global sales for lab-grown diamonds in 2022 were $12 billion and are projected to grow even more in the coming years. In 2023, De Beers cut prices in some of their diamond categories by more than 40%, responding to the fact that lab-grown prices have halved since 2016, while increasing production by 900% from 2018 to 2023, and that De Beers' year-on-year sales for rough diamonds has gone down by 37%. De Beers have even gotten into the business of lab-grown diamonds themselves, with a line called Lightbox, as they try to keep up with the changing landscape. Whatever the impact that lab-grown diamonds end up having on ground diamond sales in the coming decades though, it's important to recognize that because of some of the best marketing mankind has ever seen, diamonds have grown to hold a place in society. The marketing De Beers did for their diamonds was one of the best of all time, not just because they were able to sell more diamonds off the back of it, but also because they were able to tie it directly to love, marriage, and milestones that tied deep into people's emotions. Round diamond engagement rings have been extremely popular for decades, and they're directly tied to important moments in people's lives. Especially with how they were able to frame how people should be spending 2 months' worth of salaries on a diamond, that ended up becoming a way of showing your love and affection for the person you're giving them to, while acknowledging that it was hard work to actually give it to them. It became a gift as a show of love, it became a show of status, and it became a show of independence and doing well for yourself financially, all in one. When these started to become established as societal norms, there wasn't widespread knowledge of the human and environmental costs of getting diamonds out of the ground, nor the wars they went on to fund, never mind the future possibility of having them grown in the lab and buying them for 30 to 40% cheaper rates. The value of diamonds goes beyond a logical analysis of their price not making sense because of how common they actually are, or it not being a wise financial decision for most people to buy them. The value is more sentimental and representative. That is going to continue to come into question more and more as synthetic diamonds grow in popularity and ask the real questions of whether ground diamonds are even worth buying anymore. If you've attached a deep sentimental value to it that goes beyond the flashiness and status symbol for it to actually mean something to you or the person you're giving it to, then it's all fair game. I guess the bottom line is, if you're buying something you don't need, with money you don't have, to impress people you don't really like, nothing is really worth it. Diamonds aren't rare. They normally leave trails of blood behind them, and the market is going to keep shifting in the coming years. One of the beauties of life is that whatever that means and implies to you is completely up to you to decide.